As singers, we very often place a lot of pressure on ourselves when it comes to our performances. And sometimes we get it in our heads that our entire future, our entire career as singers, hinges upon this one performance. And that if we mess up, if something goes wrong, as it's apt to do, that we will be ruined. And that it will somehow be a sign from the universe that we're not meant to do this. And while it is understandable that we want to avoid embarrassment, and we want to build for ourselves a reputation of being good singers and putting on a great show, the fact of the matter is that the stakes aren't usually that high. So, just to be a good sport, I'm going to share with you the story of my most embarrassing performance ever. It was really embarrassing. In my first year of university, I met a friend who also sings, and he invited me to do a duet with him at his church. And this is a pretty sizable church in Toronto. And we decided that we were going to sing a cappella. I have no idea what we were thinking, but we went for an a cappella. And so the plan was for him to sing lead on the first verse and I would sing the harmony. And then on the second verse, we would reverse that and I would sing lead and he would sing harmony, and then we reverse it again for the third verse. And that's how we practiced it. And on the morning of the performance, we got up on stage and I looked out into the congregation and I recognized the faces of the director and 5 members of the Toronto Mass Choir. Now keep in mind that this was a choir for which I was one day hoping to audition. And so that put a little bit more pressure on me, right, to get this performance right, because now in my head, I had thoughts, right, and I had all that pressure on me because I wanted to impress these people. And so the pianist gave us a note on the piano just to start us out. The piano was too far for us to reach, do it ourselves. And so my friend began to sing, only he started way too low. And I was scrambling to find a harmony part because at that time I was really not very strong or skilled in singing harmony. And I was scrambling. And essentially my friend ended up singing that first verse as a solo. And so when it came time for me to take over singing lead in the second verse, I got it in my head that I was going to single-handedly fix this situation. I was going to stop this train wreck in its tracks, okay? I was going to stop it. And so what I did was I decided I was going to raise the key again. But I overshot the original key, and now we were too high. It was too high for me, and my poor friend was left scrambling for his harmony parts. And you can pretty much guess how the rest of the performance went from there, right? It just pretty much went the same way. And at the end of the performance, I started walking down the aisle to a few pity claps, and I just kept walking out the back door and to my car, where I broke down. I just started sobbing. That was so horrible. I'm mortified. That was the worst performance ever. And my friend, who was very sweet, was trying to comfort me. He's like, oh, you know, it really wasn't that bad. It wasn't as bad as you think. And I'm like, were you not just on the same stage with me? Like, were you not there? It was really bad. It was so embarrassing. It really was. And at that moment, I really had it in my head that that was the end of it for me. That I wasn't meant to do this, I wasn't cut out for it, and that I would never be able to sing in this town again, so to speak, that I would just never get gigs. Somehow it would get out that I was this horrible singer, this terrible vocal musician. I had no idea what I was doing, and I somehow just had that in my head. I hinged so much on that one performance. And I can tell you that that one performance was not the end of the world. It did not make or break my career. In fact, I went on to have a number of really successful performances, a number of great shows. I got hired at a number of places. It was not the end of my career, even though in my head I was hinging so much on it. I was placing so much undue pressure on myself. And I learned a really valuable lesson, I think, at that point, that it's really not the end of the world if we have an embarrassing performance, because again, the stakes aren't usually that high. So let me share just one other little quick story with you. about a year and a half later, after that really embarrassing performance, I was invited to sing at a church. And I was asked to sing, I think, 3 solos, and then I was going to lead a little time of worship at the end of the service. And so I got through my solos and they went relatively well, pretty smoothly. And then at the end of the service, as I was putting on my guitar strap over my head, suddenly the nerves kicked in because I wasn't really 100% confident with my guitar playing at that time. And I was fumbling, I was struggling to play the chords, and then I was so distracted by that I wasn't able to focus on my singing or my technique. And so honestly, to this day, I have no recollection whatsoever of how I actually sounded and how I actually sang at that time in those moments. All I know is I was just feeling so embarrassed, and I could just feel like my cheeks flushing red. I could feel that, how they get really warm. So embarrassed. And at the end of that worship time, I just wanted to crawl under the pews. That church didn't have pews. I wanted to crawl under the chairs. And I just wanted to go home without having to chat with anybody afterwards. I just wanted to just walk right out the building and not be subjected to the pity clapping and the whole, I was so blessed, dear, that we get from a lot of church folk. And so, but I didn't. I was, shaking hands and thanking people, and even though I disagreed with their assessment of my skills and of my performance, I just, very gratefully thanked them for the time that they allowed me to share with them. And then I thought that I would never get invited back to that church ever again. I thought that my chances of getting a repeat gig were gone. But not only was I invited back to sing at that church, but I was actually invited back 2 more times. And so again, I learned another lesson that oftentimes the audience is not expecting utter perfection. What it wants is an experience, and it wants to feel like it's part of that experience. And so sometimes if our technique is not perfect, if we mess up the words a little bit, if we kind of have a sour note here or there, the audience is probably a lot more forgiving of those little mistakes than we are. And so, not that we, again, want to have a bad performance, not that we don't want to have solid technique, but there is so much more to having a successful performance than having a perfect one. So really keep that in perspective. And so sometimes I think if we take a little bit of the pressure off of ourselves to be perfect, we will have a much better performance because we will ease into that performance and more of what's inside here will come out because we're not so much inside our heads. I know I have a really bad habit of getting inside my own head and having these sort of internal monologues that go on. I'm looking around and I'm like, oh, what's that person thinking? And is he not liking my performance? And oh my goodness, why is she doing that? So when you're gearing up for a performance, and if it doesn't really go perfectly, keep that in perspective. Use it as a learning experience, a growing experience for you. So take a look at it. Take a look at the things that went well and the things that didn't go so well, and grow from there. Use that as a launching pad for your success. So I really hope that this video was helpful and encouraging and maybe a little entertaining. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments. Maybe share your own embarrassing experiences in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching today.